Hello, snowboarders of the internet. I'm your host, Avran LeFeber, and this is Explained, the show where we break down the tech in the gear that you use. In this episode, we're going to be discussing the difference between a full-size snowboard binding disc and a mini disc for your snowboard bindings. So what is it, how does it work, and do you need it? Alright, so when it comes to your snowboard bindings base plate and disc, there's a lot that can be said about the size of it. So if you go with something that's this big versus something that's this small, you're going to notice a big difference in your binding feel as well as what kind of torque you get out of your board when you're carving. You're going to just feel a difference in performance. The bigger the disc, the bigger the dead spot underfoot, which means you've got more area to leverage a carve with, versus a smaller disc means less surface area, less dead spot, more play underfoot. It's going to change the actual response of the board and the feel that you get. With a bigger disc, you're going to get, like I said, a bigger dead spot. And that means that you're not going to be getting as much board feel underfoot, which is fine if you're trying to go for straight raw power, you're trying to drive that board. But if you're looking for more board feel, maybe you're jibbing, you're in the park, a smaller disc makes more sense because you're going to get more play underfoot and that dead spot shrinks down. I mean, if you have a dead spot that's this big versus a dead spot that's this big, which one do you think is going to be better for freestyle and which one do you think is going to be better for free riding? It's pretty damn obvious, right? Now, with that said, mini discs are not all the same. This is a union disc. This is a nitro disc. If you put the union on top of the nitro disc, you notice right away that it's actually smaller. So when you go down the line, and I've got discs from Union, Nitro, Rome Battalion, Ride, Nidecker, Now, and Drake. You look at it and it just goes, they progressively get bigger, with the Drake being the biggest and the Union being the smallest. That is going to change the board feel. So if you're a heavier rider, you're big-footed, you're just a Satchmo of a human, do you think that a disc this big is ideal for you to get torque out of a board versus a disc that's this big? It's not. This is one of the reasons that you see bigger, heavier riders breaking bindings with mini discs. They don't have the surface area, they're pulling the inserts. Sometimes they've got to run 2 screws because it doesn't fit up with what they're doing. So that's even more torque on there versus something that's this big that's going to give you a broader area to mount into and reduce the torque and stress that you're putting on the inserts. It makes sense if you're a heavier weight rider, and I'm talking like you 250 and up pound guys. You're the ones that need a bigger disc, or at least go to something that's like a medium disc, something that's not quite a mini disc, but it's not quite a big disc. You're still gonna get that lateral play in the middle, but you're gonna be able to get a little bit more torque out of it. Between the bigger and smaller, can a disc be too big? Yes, it can. It creates such a dead spot, you reduce that board feel. It doesn't have a natural feeling to it. In fact, you learn that that dead spot lessens the response out of the board. So it's not going to naturally flex. Yes, you're going to get more power, but you're not going to get the same amount of flex versus something that's smaller that's going to give you more natural feel underfoot and allow the board to be more flexible and better feeling. It's not going to be as lifeless right underfoot. It really comes down to that personal preference. Me personally, I ride a Rome binding. It's not the smallest mini disc. It's not big by comparison. If you look at them, you can fit this entirely in the center of it. So there is a noticeable difference between the two, and that changes the whole response. I still get that lateral play, but I still have enough power to drive that actual binding. One other issue with mini discs is if you have like a slam back insert pack where it's that extra 4-pack in the snowboard, these will not line up to it. So that means you've reduced where your stance options are versus something that has a bigger disc that can be slid further back just when you're trying to get that optimal powder flow. There really is a fine line between too big and too small. You want something kind of in the middle, in my opinion, unless you're really going for a lot of board feel or you want a lot of response, but you don't mind having a big dead spot. Those of us that are older riders, I'm 40, so I'm a dinosaur in snowboard years. Any of us that grew up in the 90s, the early 2000s riding, We tend to not have a problem with a bigger disc. We're used to that dead spot. It's fun. Those of you that grew up with mini discs or just a lot of board feel tend to have an issue when you transition over to something that's more responsive like that. You tend to be like, hey, I don't have the board feel, I'm not liking it. And once again, this all goes back to our personal preference of what we actually enjoy. All right, did you learn the difference between a full-size disc and a mini disc? Good, there's hope for you yet, because if you didn't, I don't know what I can do for you people, and I do mean you people. You know who you are, you sinners and heathens. Anyways, if you're new here, remember to subscribe, click the bell, get those notifications. That way you're not missing any of the videos we got coming out for all you snowboarders of the internet. And if you really like what we're doing over here and you want to support us further, swing on over to Angry Snowboarder VIP and become a member. Sure, I could tell you more here, but I got a video over there that explains it so much better. As always, I've been your host, Avran LeFeber, and I'll see you in another video. Or will I? Or will I?